Welcome, Wild One. This week's episode is special for so many reasons. Firstly, because you are here watching, and secondly, because it's nearly All Hallows Eve or Samhain, when the veil between worlds is thinnest and the spirits and otherworldly beings are able to return. The Celts believed that Samhain marked the end of the harvest and beginning of winter. For them it was a liminal time, as the lighter half of the year receded into the shadows of the darkest season. I welcome you in, as I decorate my altar ready for Samhain and make some magical potions in my apothecary. I will venture with you to the Forest of Enchantments, but of course, it wouldn't be Halloween without a spooky story, and I will share my real-life ghost story with you. And when I say real, I mean that it happened to me. So sit back and relax with your favorite autumnal brew as we traverse the boundary from light into darkness. My apprentice looks on as I try to make cleaning fun by dancing to my witchy waltz. I think this calls for a little magic. Goulish. Today, I have a wild wish, and that is to take you with me to the Forest of Enchantments. As the veil becomes thin, it is the perfect time to sit with nature and elemental beings. We may even find a fairy or two. This chapter will be quieter, so that you can take in the light and the shadow and walk with me through this magical place. I love this season, when the sunlight dapples through the trees and the colours of the leaves change from green to deep red. The sloe berries are ripe and almost ready for picking. The tree of life stands proudly, keeping watch over all of this land. Come with me, wild one, for this place is like a labyrinth, but you are safe with me, so let's get lost in the Forest of Enchantments together. I am looking for signs of fairy treasure. The fairies have already taken what was here, but I feel that they are nearby. I believe that I have found a fairy glade. This is where fairies meet to have lunch and gossip about the tricks that they have played on us. Fairy apples are a sure sign that I am on the right track. Behold, the fairies have left us some treasure, Wild One. I wonder what secrets are hidden inside. I looked up, and the trees, they parted for me. A magical pathway has appeared. The fairies drew me to a spooky place. The trees seemed to be listening to me. I found signs that other wild ones had been here before us, and I found the perfect place to rest and open the treasure chest. Amethyst, fluorite, and my magical ring? The fairies must have ported it to me. Clever fairies. I sat and nourished myself, surrounded by the sounds of nature. The energy was calm, and every now and then I could hear the pitter-patter of woodland creatures and fairies' feet. Synchronistic with that fly going by. This little butterfly wanted to make its presence known to us today. It kept patting my face with its little wings. I took in the magic of the hawthorn tree, which in Celtic tradition was known as the fairy tree, capable of transporting the wanderer to other realms. Perfect for Samhain, I thought. I stood beneath the boughs of a beautiful apple tree, another Celtic symbol for connecting the mortal world with the divine. This forest of enchantments was rich with liminal energy. I felt as though I was standing between the worlds, with this warm ethereal light falling onto my face, and the definite presence of healing energies. I said goodbye to the tiny creatures and of course the fairies. I knew the time was now right to share my real-life ghost story with you. Trick or treat, wild one. I hope you are sitting comfortably in a dimly lit room with a hot chocolate and only the faintest flicker of candles and moonlight, for it is time for me to tell you of true events. My ghost story begins in the past, for it was roughly 2011 when I moved into a moderately sized Georgian apartment which stood in the middle of a busy town centre and which was very close to an old Georgian hospital. The hospital was built in the early 1800s. Now, there are still people living in the location today, so for legal reasons I should be careful not to identify the exact location. However, it is reasonable to say that the apartment was in Somerset, England. I lived in this apartment for about 3 years, and when I first moved in, I was struck by the cosy ambience. Apart from the fact that it had night storage heaters and was very drafty due to the old Georgian sash windows, this place was otherwise light, bright and welcoming. I was excited to move in, as my previous flat and first ever rental property was a small cottage which had once been an old mill, and thus it was next to a stream and always had problems arising from the damp conditions. So, I was pleased to be leaving that oppressive atmosphere and moving into an apartment which had plenty of light and which overlooked the centre of town. I could sit in my kitchen and people watch when I had my breakfast and my dinner. For the first year or so, all was well. There was nothing untoward. The place was, how can I say, well, normal. It wasn't until I started dating someone that things started to change in the strangest of ways. In the months which led up to our breakup, this is when strange things started to happen in the apartment. Now, the layout of this place is very important to the story, so to help you imagine it, I will walk you through the apartment and describe it to you. The apartment was on the first floor, and to get to it you had to unlock the access door with a key, go up one flight of stairs and then unlock the door of the apartment with another key. There was only one other person who lived in this section of the building, and she was a young professional who kept herself to herself and lived above me up another flight of stairs. Once inside my apartment, there was a very small hallway, not even really big enough to call it a hallway to be honest. If you turned left, you would immediately enter a very small bedroom, which had room for a double bed and nothing else but a nightstand. If you shimmied around the bed in an L shape, you would come to the only washroom in the house, which was an ensuite toilet which also had a very small shower. There were no other exits or entryways to the bedroom and ensuite, only the bedroom door to the left of the main apartment entrance. If you turned right from the entrance, you walked immediately into a reasonably sized living room, big enough for 2 large Georgian sash windows which ran along the front of the building. If you walked into the living room and then left, there was one carpeted step up into the kitchen, which was also very small and had another sash window and an L-shaped worktop and cooker space. To give you an idea of the size, I could only fit an under-counter fridge and a small washing machine under the worktops, and I had just about enough room for a small round cafe table and 2 cafe chairs. The first strange occurrence happened one morning when myself and my ex were getting ready to leave for work. I didn't drive and my workplace was in the next town over, so I needed to leave to catch the bus. I found my handbag and checked to make sure that I had the bus money, as in those days you had to pay cash, as there was no electronic chip and PIN cards that could be used, and if you gave the bus driver money which was too big, they would frequently refuse you, and so I didn't want to be late for work. I was sure that I had taken out a £5 note the day before, but it was not in my bag. I asked my ex if he had any money that I could please borrow, and he looked and he didn't have any either. I was feeling pressured for time, so I left to go outside, cross the road and quickly get more cash out from the cash point machine or ATM. I opened the apartment door, walked down the stairs and opened the door to the building, and that's when I saw it. On the ground, on the doorstep, was a crisp £5 note. Now, at this point, I should explain that the doorstep was tucked around the side of another building, and so it was a very private nook, which was protected from the wind and also was not regularly accessed or even visible to passers-by. I felt a funny feeling when I looked at the note and I picked it up. I took it upstairs and said to my ex, was he playing a prank on me? Had he put it on the step? He of course denied this, and to be honest, I do believe him, as he had been with me since we woke up and had not left the flat to my recollection. I thought it unlikely that it belonged to anyone else. It looked like it had just appeared there as if by magic. Now normally I would never pick up money I found, as I have a conscience and would always return it or leave it for the person to retrace their steps and find it themselves. But I realised that what must have happened is that when finding my keys the previous evening to open the main door, the £5 note must have fallen out of my bag, and as the doorstep was sheltered from the wind, it must have simply stayed there until morning. So I debunked it and talked myself out of any strange feelings about the incident. I then forgot all about it and was just grateful to get to work on time. A week or two later, and there was another strange occurrence. This second incident happened when my ex and I were eating dinner after work and in the evening. It was winter time, and as I had mentioned to you, this apartment was old and had Georgian sash windows and only a night storage heater, so it was very drafty and very cold once the sun had set, especially in winter time. As there was no natural warmth in that place, I had put a duvet on the sofa so that when we watched TV, we could put the duvet over us. In those days, I had a little two-seater sofa bed, and the bottom of the sofa was very close to the floor, so you could not hoover under it without moving it. This was where the frame of the sofa bed folded into it and was stored. On this winter's evening, my ex and I had the duvet over our knees and our dinner on our laps whilst we watched TV. My ex liked ketchup on most things, and I liked mayonnaise, so we had the two condiments on the glass-top coffee table which was directly in front of us. After dinner, we both got up to do the dishes and tidy things away. My ex carried our plates into the kitchen and then went through to the bedroom and then to the ensuite. I followed him because I wanted to use the mirror which was in the bedroom. I came out of the bedroom first and walked into the living room, remembering that I needed to put the ketchup and mayonnaise away, but the bottle and the jar were nowhere to be seen. Logically, I assumed that my ex, who was still in the ensuite bathroom, must have already carried them up the step into the kitchen. But when I went to check, the condiments were nowhere to be seen. I called to my ex to ask where they'd gone, and he said that he'd left it on the glass-top coffee table. He came out of the ensuite, out of the bedroom and into the living room with me, and we started to look for the ketchup bottle and the mayo jar, but they were nowhere. We both thought this was a bit strange, and a bit like the £5 note, it seemed like we were going a bit mad, or perhaps somebody was playing a trick on us, or something. A bit perplexed, we decided to get under the duvet and sit on the couch and watch the rest of our film. But as I lifted up the duvet, I found, yep, you've guessed it, the ketchup and mayo, placed in a very specific way. They were end to end, side by side, touching, and they were almost tucked under the sofa bed. Therefore, they were under the duvet cover, kind of tucked in. Now this was very strange, partly because of their placements, but also because it looked so deliberate. It would have been impossible for both the bottle and jar to have rolled off the coffee table and under the duvet, as the duvet was how we'd left it, and was effectively acting like a barrier between the table and the floor, as well as the bottom of the sofa. This time, I knew that it had definitely not been my ex playing any pranks on me, as he had left the sofa first, and I'd been left in the living room, and at that point the ketchup and mayo were definitely both on the table. My ex had then gone straight into the ensuite, and he could not have got into the living room again without passing me by, which I am obviously absolutely certain that he didn't do. At this point, the incidents were unusual but somewhat playful, a little childish perhaps, sort of like an inconvenient prank. But things would soon start to become much more dramatic, with objects moving in front of my very eyes. Winter came to an end, and spring gradually thawed the frost. We had all but forgotten about these two odd events, again brushing them off and dismissing them. Life continued as normal, but by now the relationship with my ex was more than strained. The third, much more spooky occurrence happened when I was in the apartment by myself. I'd called things off and told my ex that I wanted to break up. I remember that I was sat on my bed and my phone beeped to say that I had a text. It was from my ex, and he'd been doing some thinking and he said he missed me and wanted to get back together. I carried the phone into the kitchen. I knew in my gut this was not a healthy relationship for me, but still I felt compelled to agree to what he wanted. I remember that as I was debating this in my mind, I started to boil some water on the stove to make some pasta for myself. As I was watching the pan, the water gradually came to the boiling point, and I picked up the phone, replied, gave in, and told him, okay, we could get back together and he could come back to the apartment soon. As soon as I sent that text, in that split second, I swear, a picture which was hanging on the wall of the kitchen flew across the room and smacked with absolute force into the wall on the opposite side before crashing to the kitchen floor dramatically. I remember being shocked, as I had experienced objects moving location or disappearing and then reappearing again, but I had never seen poltergeist-style activity myself. In fact, a poltergeist wasn't even something that I particularly believed in. I remember saying out loud, okay, I know that's not a very good idea, meaning that I knew getting back with my ex was obviously not a wise decision. He moved back in for a while until we split up permanently a month or so later. After that event and after the breakup, things went back to normal and other areas of my life flourished. My health was getting better and I researched Buddhism and I meditated a lot. I also found my mum's old tarot deck and started to work with the cards, something I had grown up around but had never done myself before. Everything was peaceful, but there were too many memories now in my apartment and it didn't feel like mine anymore because of the bad relationship, so I decided to move towns. This is when the final and most frightening incident occurred. To this very day, it is still so vivid in my mind and is the only time that I have ever truly felt shocked and frightened. I had almost finished packing up most of my ornaments and also the contents of the kitchen. I was nearly completely ready for moving day, which was only a couple of weeks away. The very last experience that I had in that apartment was whilst I was asleep. Now I started to sleep the opposite way in bed, which yes, it's a bit strange, but it made me feel less alone after my breakup for some reason. So I had my feet facing the headboard, and behind the headboard was a small sash window and a window ledge where I kept photos of me and my best friend, as well as me and my dad, and also an old photo of my grandmother from my mum's side. Incidentally, my friend and my dad were both very much alive, but my grandmother had been deceased since before I was born. I'd gone to sleep facing the window in the photos, when I woke up in the middle of the night suddenly for some unknown reason, and what I saw paralysed me with fear. Now I must stress that I was very much awake and not dreaming. I was also able to move, I was just terrified, and I was definitely not experiencing sleep paralysis. So I opened my eyes to see a woman stood at the headboard. Now if I was to use my imagination to invent a ghost in that apartment, it would most definitely have been a ghost in Georgian or Victorian dress, due to the age and history of both the building I lived in as well as the old hospital nearby. But this apparition didn't look anything like that. She was as clear as day, but not solid. She looked a lot like a hologram from Star Trek or something. I could see through her image like she was made of static. However, the image was extremely clear as if I looked upon you now, wild one. I will now describe to you what she looked like. She was about 5 foot 5 inches tall. She was wearing blue denim jeans and a black and white horizontally striped long sleeve t-shirt. She wore a dark navy or maybe dark green tabard over her t-shirt, like the ones that dinner ladies, carers or some cleaners wear. The tabard went as far over her bottom as to the top of her thighs, and she had short cropped bleached blonde hair, which was very poorly bleached. It had different shades of white and bleach in it, and the cut was very choppy and spiky and outdated. But it was what she was doing that terrified me most. I looked on, and she didn't appear to know that I was awake, but I felt that she knew somehow that I was there. She had her back to me, and she was looking at the photographs which were on the window ledge, specifically the one of me and my best friend. To this day, I will never forget the way that she was hunched over, peering intently, scrutinising the photo of me and my friend. She was definitely interacting with my environment. Another thing that I'll never forget is the strong sense that I'd woken up at the wrong moment and that I wasn't meant to see this. I was terrified that she would turn around and look me right in the eyes. As she was at the end of my bed near my feet, she was so close to me that she could touch me or even harm me if she could do so or wanted to do so. The room was still dark, but that didn't stop me from being able to see her, a detail which, like so much of this, I cannot explain. I closed my eyes, held my breath, and bravely pretended to be asleep. I stayed like this for several hours until the reassuring light of dawn came through the window and I gradually felt it was safe to open my eyes. When I did so, I looked around and found that the room was as you would expect, completely empty and as it usually was. Nobody was there. I fled my bedroom to the living room and called my mother hysterically. I told her what I saw, and to this very day, over 10 years later, this is still the most terrifying experience of my life, because it completely changed my perception of what I would call reality. I don't know if I saw a ghost, as in the spirit of a deceased person, or if I saw something from another dimension or a time period, although the being was dressed in a very modern way. Obviously, I'm unlikely to ever know what it was. I've had other experiences before and also since then, yet it is this experience which struck fear into my heart at the time and which has stayed sharply in my mind since the night that it occurred. I wonder, do you have any ghost stories, Wild One? I should love to hear of them in the comments. So as this tale comes to a close, I wanted to thank you, Wild One, for listening, wish you a happy Halloween, oh and also, sleep tight. Next time on Wild Wish, walk with me between the light and the darkness as I conduct a release ritual, removing obstacles and laying down my heavy burdens from this year. I do some traditional divination and I continue to walk deeper into the darkness of Samhain, lingering once again amongst the shadows of the Forest of Enchantments and sharing more ghoulish folktales with you. See you next week, Wild One. Thank you for watching, like if you like, and subscribe if you vibe.